What is going on? The New England Patriots and William Belichick take down the Pittsburgh Steelers 21-18. It feels like Bill in New England has been beating Pittsburgh for 20 plus years. Even at 2-10, I was out at a restaurant tonight with my girlfriend. She looked up. She said, "The New England Patriots are 2-10." I'm like, "Yes, Maria. Their defense is really good, but their offense is putrid. But they scored 21 points. They win the game." We will dive into Mike Tomlin. We will dive in to Belichick and the New England Patriots, and talk about some other stuff that we saw today. Sean McDermott was peppered today over, I guess, an article came out from Ty Dunn on the Sean McDermott era. And I guess an instance that happened in 2019 about 9/11, which it's behind a paywall. Wasn't able to read the article, but I do think it's fascinating with the Buffalo Bills these next couple of weeks. Is the guy coaching for his job? The Jags were robbed of $22 million. My main takeaway is, God, the NFL is flushing cash if it takes them years to find out that they're missing $22 million. And the bold take of the week, which I'm excited for. But before we dive into that all, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Appreciate everyone that has. And subscribe to the podcast, 3 and Out, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, same thing. Make sure you subscribe. Tell all your friends, tell all your enemies. Appreciate everyone that has. And thevolume.com, we have merch. I'm rocking a hat right now. And before we dive into some football stuff, here's what I need you to do. Next week, I'm going to a concert for my girlfriend's birthday. And I'm doing it because I have friends, I have partners, and I have the best ticketing app, I think, in America, and it's called Gametime. You download the Gametime app, and you search tickets. Football games, basketball games, hockey games, concerts, comedy shows. Any event you want to go to, download the Gametime app and search. And when you find it, use the promo code John, 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 John Rahm, Jon. He's at Live. I'm John Middlekauff, John, and I'm here. Download the Gametime app, promo code John, $20 off, and buy yourself a pair of tickets. Holiday season, give a gift, and enjoy yourself and do it on us, promo code John. A lot of angles you'd go with this game, really. I mean, it's funny. I mean, the Patriots were kicking their ass early. The Steelers came roaming back. And the only thing I could think of, really the entire game, was these two coaches. And I read an article today about Belichick, about the trading for him. What could they get? What are the possibilities this offseason? And I've been saying forever, Bill Belichick is not going to be the coach of the New England Patriots next year. Not because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's lost 3 games this year where his team has held the opponent 10 points or less. First time that's happened since 1938. Honestly, I didn't know football really existed before like 1960. I don't claim to be a historian here, but it shows you. Bill Belichick really knows what he's doing. He's an excellent defensive coordinator. He's very dependent on his offensive coordinator, and he's very dependent on a quarterback, which he had Brady for 2 decades, and he had Josh McDaniels for the majority of it, and they kicked the shit out of basically everybody. And listen, I like Alex Smith a lot. I actually have a lot of respect for Alex Smith because when I was in college, the 49ers were the equivalent of who's the worst team in the league right now? The Carolina Panthers. I mean, there were a lot of bad teams, but they were as bad as anybody. They had bad ownership. They had bad coaching. They had bad players. They just had a bad organizational philosophy. They were a joke. And Alex Smith somehow just survived. When Alex said the other day that they benefited a lot from the division, he wasn't wrong. The division, for the most part, the Dolphins were awful. The Jets were awful. And the Bills were putrid. The Jets had a couple years with Rex, and the Dolphins had like 1 year with Tony Sparano and the Wildcat. But for the most part, it was an embarrassment. He was right. But they also, any team they played that mattered, they beat. Specifically the Pittsburgh Steelers for decades. And Bill Belichick still knows what he's doing defensively. When I watch the Steelers, and we'll get to Bill in a minute, like, because I don't think this changes much. I've been saying this for a while. I think it was 2 weeks ago. They ended up beating the Bengals, and it actually aged pretty well because Jake Browning had, I don't know, the game of his life on Monday Night Football. But they were losing the game for a minute. And I thought, is this it for Tomlin? They ended up winning the game. And I thought, well, they were 8-3 or 7-3. And then you looked at their schedule. They had 4 games. You're like, they're a lock to win. I'm like, they're going to be 11-3. And people are going to go, how in the world does a team with Kenny Pickett as their quarterback, a team that sucks on offense, gonna go 11-3 and be in position to like compete for the number 1 seed, let alone it was like, what? Well, they're not, because they lost to the Cardinals and they lost to the Patriots, who, I did the math coming into the game, were 4-20. Mike Tomlin at home, just lost to 2 teams in December when his team was 7-3 and then 7-4, to 2 teams who were combined 4-20. So listen, I think Mike Tomlin's good at his job. Not counting this season's not going great, but let me rephrase that. I think Mike Tomlin would have a lot of people who would be very interested in making him the head coach. If Mike Tomlin was fired, he would immediately, a lot like Bill, have a job before you could blink. He would become a head coach instantly. I do think it's over in Pittsburgh. Like, it's time for a change. And I threw it out on social media, and a lot of people were like, you think the Roonies are never firing Tomlin? For a long time, I always supported it. You can't have a time when you have a team that lose back-to-back games in Thanksgiving and early December to 2 teams who are fucking terrible. You're allowed to lose to the Ravens. You're allowed to lose to the 49ers. You're allowed to lose to good teams in big spots. It's football. You can't lose to the Cardinals and the Patriots in a 4-day span and still be taken seriously, when there were already major question marks. You haven't won a playoff game in forever. And again, I'm a Mike Tomlin fan. I do think, and I've been saying this for a while, I was in Philadelphia when Andy Reid was fired by Jeffrey Lurie. And it was just time. Now, it was easier because he had a 4-12 season, but like, your shelf life as a head coach is not infinite. It doesn't last forever. There comes a point in time where it's just, we need change. We need to press the reset button. Whether you are Bill Belichick, whether you are Phil Jackson, whether you are Joe Torre. I saw it with Bruce Bochy in San Francisco. I'm talking about guys who have won a combined like 25 championships, and they move on and they go to new places. It's healthy. I've changed jobs. I'm sure many people listening have changed jobs. It's like a reset on your life in a good way. And I watch Mike Tomlin, and listen, I respect the shit out of this guy. And I listened to a couple podcasts with him coming into the season. And one thing he said is he was very, very excited to kind of prove his worth with a new quarterback and prove his worth, with a non-like Hall of Fame guy and kind of start fresh. I said it from the jump when they drafted Kenny Pickett. It was never going to work. And then the moment he got injured, Mitch Trubisky sucks. He really does. And there are certain backup quarterbacks where you can win some games. And then there are guys like Trubisky where I don't care how good your team is. I don't care if TJ Watt gets you 10 sacks a game, or, Minkah Fitzpatrick picks off a couple picks. I don't care. You're going to lose way more than you're going to win. And the moment you have to start this guy, and it's not their choice because they're starting quarterbacks up in the booth, with the coordinators, you're screwed. Now, I don't know who was behind giving him a second contract extension with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that's beside the point. Like, this team needs new blood. This franchise needs new blood. And I actually think Mike Tomlin would benefit a lot from just being like the coach of the Chargers next year, the coach of the Bears next year, the coach of the Washington Commanders next year. I think it'd be your classic win-win. Look at the Eagles. They fired Andy Reid. He went to the Chiefs. He's had a Hall of Fame career as the Chiefs coach alone. They've gone on to win a Super Bowl with Doug, get to another one with Sirianni. Like, sometimes just going your separate ways in a divorce professionally is the healthiest thing for every party. And I've been watching the Steelers, and I thought this a couple weeks ago with the Bengals. I've thought it way more these last 2 weeks. It's over. Like, where is this team going? Even if somehow they still make the playoffs, what is going to happen? Newsflash, nothing. Nothing is going to happen. They're not going to win a game. They're going nowhere. And I think the easiest thing to do in football is like, well, how do we upgrade? And I got this the other day in a mailbag question. Well, because this guy basically was saying that Pete Carroll is one of the most overrated coaches in the NFL over the last couple of years. When, their defense is terrible. He's a defensive head coach. They've invested all this money. And it's so easy for everyone on the outside to go, well, how are you going to upgrade over Pete Carroll? How are you going to do better? Well, if you always have that mindset, how are you ever going to make any progress? And I think the Steelers really hang their hat on, well, we've had 3 coaches in 75 years. Okay, that's good. And over a couple of them, you won a bunch of Super Bowls. But the last I checked, you guys haven't won dick in a long time. So how about we make a change? Not because we think Mike Tomlin sucks. Jeffrey Lurie didn't think Andy Reid sucks. He just knew it was time. And I think when you watch the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm someone that picked them to not only win the division, but compete with the Chiefs to win the conference. I had so much belief in this team in the preseason and believed the hype and Kenny Pickett, and I feel like an idiot. And I watch him, especially these last 2 weeks, I'm like, it's over. Cut the cord. I don't mean fire him now, but at the end of the season, like, go your separate ways. He'll immediately get another job and go get another coach. Because guess what your job offer would immediately be? The Chargers, if they were willing to pay anything, would be number 1 because they have Justin Fields. Or not Justin Fields, but Justin Herbert. Right? That job immediately would be sweet just because of the quarterback. But there is no job that would be better than, like, you want to be the coach? I don't know of a team that never fires anybody. Like, that you'd be really high, even with some of your flaws. So Tomlin would immediately get a job, and everyone would be lined up to be the head coach of the Pittsburgh fucking Steelers. It's like the New York Yankees, like the LA Lakers, like the Dallas Cowboys, like Alabama football. It's like Duke basketball. Like, people want that job. It means a lot. That's why Mike Tomlin never wants to let go. I don't blame him. It's an elite job. It's why he was so offended a couple years ago when they're like, hey, would you want to take $100 million to be the head coach of the USC Trojans? And I've never seen a guy so angry over being rumored for another job. And I understand it, because you would never take the USC job if you're the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I just think it's time. Can you believe we're this deep into the NFL season? We got to make every second count. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on any matchup. So right now, get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on the NFL. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. And then when you watch the New England Patriots, Bill is not some idiot. Listen, he's old, and we can question how good of a GM is. He clearly has some issues. But when you just look at his ability to influence the game as a defensive head coach, he's been excellent. Like, he's still really good. And you can only, like, Bailey Zappi, he's playing with Bailey Zappi. Now, if you want to crush him for drafting Mac Jones, I gladly will. That's not in a million years. If I would rather, if you're like, hey, I want you to draft this guy at 15, I'd say fire me. I would never take that guy. And I said it with Kenny Pickett at 20. I'm not a believer in taking that guy in the first round. I can't do it. I won't do it, to quote Mike Singletary. But he did it. And he was desperate for a quarterback. And this year it's bit him in the ass. And I was thinking when they were kicking the Steelers' ass, and it was like 21-3 or something, if he just had a decent offense with how good his defense has been in some of these games, I mean, they're probably a 5-7 team. And then they win the night. All of a sudden, they're like, you're like, they're not an embarrassment. Now, I still believe what I've been saying for a while. It's time to end this. No different with Tomlin. Some things come to an end, right? Some divorces are inevitable. And in coaching, you don't get to like go out like John Elway. Like, I'm going out on top. It's not the way it works. You get fired. Check the history of any coach. They get shit canned. I think Belichick, I read this article on The Athletic about his trade value. You know, some they basically polled and talked to a bunch of anonymous GMs and executives around the NFL. And some believe like you'd still get a first round pick for Bill Belichick. Some believed it'd be complicated because, you know, he doesn't necessarily have a GM that comes hand in hand. He's the GM, and most people don't want him to be the GM. But as a coach, it can't be really disputed. You would take, especially, let's use the Commanders as an example. If they got Belichick, let's do it this way. If I ran the Eagles and I ran the Cowboys, would I rather have the Commanders hire anybody or Bill Belichick? Right? Ben Johnson or Brian Johnson or whoever Mike McDaniel's guy is. Just go around the league, all these quote-unquote hotshot offensive coordinators. I would pay them to hire one of those guys because history would say, a lot like a quarterback, that guy is a 50-50 proposition at best, right? Bill Belichick, like, if they actually have some players there, and like I've been saying forever, I was asked this the other day, like, what do you think happens with Sam Howell? Do you think that the Washington, would they draft a quarterback? I said, until I know who their coach is, I don't think we can speculate on what the hell they're going to do. Because if you tell me that Bill Belichick is their head coach, I could see him being like, I could win 8 or 9 games with Sam Howell, right? I remember Jim Harbaugh got the head coaching job for the 49ers. Alex Smith was a joke. He's like, I want Alex Smith to stay here. What happened the next year? They won 13 games. They made it to the NFC Championship. So I think Bill Belichick's offseason is going to be fascinating. Now, I don't know the crafts. I'm not saying that it's a 100% lock that they fire him. Maybe they look, there's no better options, but I do think it's time to break up, and I think they get some for him right now. And I think he's going to have a lot of value on the open market. And like I said earlier this week on a podcast, he has his offensive coordinator available. Like, part of Bill Belichick, the power that is him, we talk a lot about Brady. It's actually Josh. When you give Josh to Bill Belichick, 2 years ago, they made the playoffs with Mac Jones. Mac Jones is terrible. So I think you're looking at 2 franchises here. I think they got new coaches next year. I think both of them have new coaches next year. And it's easier for me to say that with New England because of everything that's transpired over the last couple of years. It's easy to argue like, oh, Pittsburgh's not going to. I think we're no different than them. We all see it. Like, it's kind of over. I saw Sean McDermott. I didn't have access to the article. I don't subscribe to the Substack that Ty Dunn writes. But there was an incident in 2019 where Sean McDermott said something about 9/11, which I watched the press conference today that he had friends die in 9/11. He's a New York guy. To me, I don't even – I have no take on that. I can't – it was hard for me even to follow the story. But one thing's pretty clear because something I said about Brian Daboll a couple weeks ago, which I stand by, that his coaching staff is not big believers in the guy, not a huge fan of Brian Daboll, is someone that covers the Giants a couple days ago texted me and said, you got pretty good sources on Brian Daboll. And we started texting like, you think Brian Daboll could lose his job with the Giants? And he's like, oh, it depends on the Maras. But the one thing I could see if Sean McDermott were to lose his job, him try to get back to the Bills. Of course. I mean, you'd rather be with Josh Allen than anything the Giants have. And I started thinking that Sean McDermott, like, to me, given their history, even if this year gets weird and they miss, I believe he's earned enough these last 3 years, 13, 11, and 13 wins, to maintain his job. But that's not the way football works. These owners have never been richer. They've never been less emotionless when they turn on a coach. It's never been easier for them to get rid of a guy regardless of his contract. So if the Bills were to end up, let's just say, look at their schedule, 8-9, it's not inconceivable that Sean McDermott is fired. And for the first time, when I watched Sean, again, like I didn't know all the context of this 9/11 story in 2019. It was kind of irrelevant. All I know is there was a lot of heat when it comes to this organization. There is a lot of urgency to win and win now. In these next 2 weeks at Kansas City and then playing Dallas might be the guy's Buffalo career. And I've known Sean for a long time. Whenever I see him, he's cool. When I text him, he texts me back. I'm a Sean McDermott fan. Now, I've never worked for him as the head coach. Like, listen, I can only speak to my relationship with him. I like the guy. I think I've always thought he was one of the most impressive guys in my 39 years of life I've ever been around. His discipline, his work ethic. You know, some of these stories that come out that he can be a dick, I never really saw that. He was always cool to me. But clearly sometimes a defensive head coach, when you have an offensive oriented, I mean, they're a quarterback driven team, things can splinter fast. And there are a lot of stories anytime you lose. But I think this guy needs to win. I think he needs to win fast. And I think these next 2 games, because all of a sudden you beat the Chiefs and the Cowboys and you're 8-6 and headed toward the playoffs to be a 10 or 11 win team, everything's okay. Hell, maybe you win a playoff game in a big upset fashion and everyone likes you again. But you go 8-9, you miss the playoffs, things can turn on you fast. And these owners have so much money. You could kind of feel the tension when he was answering this question about something that happened. At first, when I was watching this press conference and trying to figure out what was going on, I'm like, he said this last week, trying to galvanize the team when shit was hitting the fan. No, this happened a long time ago. I'm like, God, when that type of stuff happens, I got red flags on your operation. And I do think that there is legitimate heat. So this is a massive, massive weekend for the Bills. And listen, to play Andy Reid and the Chiefs, whose team is not as good as it's been, but to play them after a loss at home is not an ideal spot. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's a great spot for the Bills. After a loss? I mean, at home in Kansas City? I don't know. I think it's going to be very tough. Listen, getting in an accident is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. 35% of all fatal accidents occur between 6 o'clock and midnight. People aged 15 to 24 had the highest rate of emergency room visits due to car accidents of all age groups. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm with over 100 offices nationwide and 900 lawyers. Morgan & Morgan has been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Listen, we've all known people who have gotten accidents, and having good representation is key. Having someone that you can believe in and submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is so easy. If you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/John or pound law, pound 529 from your cell. This is a paid advertisement. A couple more things. The Jags were robbed of $22 million over 4 years. I saw someone tweet out that said, if anything has ever symbolized the success of the National Football League over the last decade, an NFL team could be robbed by an employee of $22 million, and it took them years to notice. And it's one thing, the Cowboys, the Niners, some of these, the Packers, some of these huge brands, the Jags, which are got to be a bottom 5, quote unquote, brand. Pretty wild story. I mean, I read some of the athletic stories. This guy's buying cryptocurrency. He's buying Porsches. I mean, this guy, $22 million. And listen, anytime I've known some people that have had some small businesses, some really small, talking maybe $1 million or $2 million in revenue, and others that were probably way more than that have been robbed by people that had worked for them. Money's all relative. And whether you own a company, you're not accounting for every dollar. You're not getting daily printouts. It's not as crazy as you think. getting robbed by an employee. And I know I had a very, very close friend get in one of these situations for less money than this. And I think sometimes the employee feels, they look at you, they're envious is probably the wrong way to put it. They go, I'm doing just as much work as you. What, we're equals. Why don't I have any access to this money? And I think sometimes you get a convoluted, especially if you're a little crazy. I would imagine this happens more than you realize, because for every public incident, this happened to the Sacramento Kings years ago and the Jags. I think it happens to a lot of companies with a lot of people. I know the two people that had it happen to them that I know, they trusted these people like to the nth degree. I know one of them was a girl, and they would have trusted their lives with this girl. I actually went to high school with her, and she robbed them of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I do think that this stuff is a little more prevalent than most of us realize. And other than that, before we get the bold take, Roger Goodell called Vegas Sportstown, USA. One thing that's pretty clear in my lifetime, for the majority, like in the 90s, the last 15 years up until the last couple of years, it's crazy how anti-gambling all these leagues were. And it just shows you, like, most of these people don't actually care. Like, I've said this forever with marijuana and the NFL testing for it. Like, half the owners are probably high as I speak right now. They don't care about weed. They just care about the insurance premiums, the reason that they have to test the guy. It's all based on money. It's all just a spreadsheet. It's not, there's no emotion involved. It's not because they actually care that their starting wide receiver, DB, is getting high 3 times a week. The owner's getting high 7 times a week. It's irrelevant. It's all about the bottom line. And I think the owners, most rich people, if you've ever gone to Vegas, hell, you don't even need to have money. I went there, poor as a guy on the street when I was in college. I had no money. I had to take a credit line from my credit card to get $1,000 to gamble that weekend for my buddy's 21st birthday. And I was like, this fucking place is incredible. First time I ever went to Vegas, I was 21 years old. I had just $100 in my name. The only money I had was like my $3,000 credit card that I had to use to get some actual cash. This place was incredible. I can't even imagine, and I've been since when I have more money, but being an NFL owner, obviously NFL player, people love Vegas. If you have money, it's very fun. There's a lot to do, and they don't even need to hide it anymore. And the Super Bowl's there this year. I think more big events are going to go. They remember when Kamara got in trouble for beating someone up at a club. They had the Pro Bowl there. This place is going to be the mecca of sports. So when Roger calls it Sportstown USA, I don't think necessarily it's Sportstown USA, but it's Event Town USA. And it's Big Event Town USA. It's cool shit happens USA. And the NFL, while they have a team that is not very good there right now, it's kind of irrelevant. Stadium's cool, and they have access to it. And it's probably the best thing they've done in recent memory, because the Oakland area has now lost 3 teams in 6-7 years. And if we were starting any franchise from scratch, we could list 100 places. Oakland would not be one of them. They will never, ever get another professional team ever again. And Vegas is going to have all 4 teams within the next 3 or 4 years, right? They got a baseball team. They're going to have a basketball team. They obviously have a football team, and they have a hockey team. So, and I was I was close to it. I was working with the Raiders. I didn't want to see them go. It's the best thing that ever happened to the NFL. It's obviously the best thing that ever happened to the Raiders financially, but the NFL used them, right? The Chargers, it didn't matter where you put them. Throw the Chargers with the Rams and put the Raiders. I think it worked out really, really perfectly. Now, ideally, I think if you could do it over again, if I was in charge, I would have put the Rams in LA. I would have kept the Chargers in San Diego, and I would have put the Raiders in Vegas. And then I think we would have had something. But regardless where the Chargers are, it probably doesn't matter. And before we get out of here, my bold take of the week, brought to you by my friends at Guinness. Now, I'm hot, right? I just had Alabama beating Georgia, and they took care of business. There's the Army-Navy game is this week, is the only college game, which I got to go to when I was in Philadelphia. I would highly recommend. It is, the football, both teams run like basically the wing tee, but the entire event, the pageantry, the opening equivalent of the axe and everyone flying. It's badass. If you like football, like America, it's fucking incredible. But no take there. I haven't watched one snap this year of Army and Navy. Obviously, both programs are down. I do think, listen, the Texans, what they've done this year is incredible. And I would buy, if they were a stock, I'd put $100,000 into them yesterday for the next 5 years. I think they are like a rocket ship. I don't think they're a lock to make the playoffs this year, even how things are shaping. Now, I don't think that they easily could. They may end up 11-6. They could end up 10-7 and be in the playoffs. I also think it wouldn't shock me if they end up 9-8. I think this week is the perfect storm. Get a huge week in Denver, big win in Denver, or against Denver, at home. Obviously, the Jags win. Everyone's feeling each other. And then you go to New York. And everyone, including myself, Jets suck, terrible organization, just fold the franchise. Zach Wilson doesn't want to play. I could see Zach Wilson having a big game. You know why? None of it fucking matters. It doesn't matter. What does anyone have to lose anymore? Clearly, no one's getting fired. The offensive coordinator's coming back from Rodgers. Zach Wilson's not going to be there. Whatever. He's got nothing to lose. I think the Jets win this week. Listen, it's the ultimate trap spot, but I also think it's just a weird spot. They would be one of the last teams I'd want to play on the road, given the situation. I just think things get weird, and I think the Jets win, and I think Zach Wilson, listen, I think it's a one-off situation. My guess is Zach Wilson looks good this weekend. That is my bold take, brought to you by Guinness. Gather your friends, raise your glasses, and toast to a win. Guinness Draft Stout, imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York. Please drink responsibly.